The Wyoming sky in July 1878 hung gray as cold steel over the town of Dusty Hollow. It's a thin veil of red dust coating the weathered wooden streets. The wind lay still, leaving the air heavy with grit and unspoken tension. From the crumbling steeple of St. Mary's Church, a lone bell tolled, sharp and hollow, but no one looked up. Every eye was fixed on the crooked auction platform where women stood in a ragged line, trembling like fence posts battered by a storm. Clara Wren, 24, stood at the end, her sun-bleached brown hair loosely braided, a stray lock falling across her cheek, shielding eyes sharp as a blade. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, revealing pale skin marred by faint scars, marks of years under the thumb of Amos Holt, a debt collector with a cruel hand. She stood tall, unbowed, though her wrists were loosely bound behind her. Amos Broad, and red-faced from whiskey and rage, climbed the platform. "She won't stand straight," he growled, his voice carrying like thunder over the crowd. Not fit to bear a name, let alone run a household. His hand rose and a slap cracked. Through the air, wet and sharp as an axe, biting raw hide. Clara's head snapped to the side, her lip bleeding where she bit down to stifle a cry. The crowd stood frozen. No one moved. Agatha Boone, the seamstress, clutched her handkerchief and whispered to her neighbor that one's trouble. No man wants a wild thing like her. Reverend Daniels, lingering by the church gate, shook his head with judgmental eyes. No one dared meet Amos's gaze except one man. Jack Callahan rode into town as the sun hit its peak. His leather coat was too heavy for the heat, his boots caked with red clay from distant fields. He hadn't planned to stay in Dusty Hollow. The town was once home, but now it held only ghost memories of his wife. Sarah, her smile like dawn, lost to fever 3 years ago. He came for a new bridle and horse salve, intending to leave before the past choked him. But that slap, raw and piercing, stopped him cold. He tied his horse outside the general store, his head turning toward the auction yard, blue eyes darkening, with something heavy like storm clouds rolling in. Before he could move closer, a scream shattered the air. A gray horse, eyes wild with panic, broke free from a nearby stable, charging through the crowd. People shouted, scattering like dry leaves. A boy, no older than 10, froze in the street, too terrified to run. Clara, hands still bound, spun and shoved the boy out of the horse's path with her shoulder. She fell hard, dust coating her hair, but the boy was safe. The crowd murmured, some eyes softening toward her, but Amos only sneered. "Don't let that fool you. She's a feral beast, nothing more." Jack stood a few paces away, fingers tight on the reins. He saw Clara rise, pain etched in her movements but not her face. He saw her eyes, not fear, not pleading, but a fire that burned despite being smothered. He stepped through the crowd, boots steady on the dirt. $10, he said, voice low and solid as stone. The crowd held its breath. Amos laughed, but his eyes flickered with doubt. "A widower like you, Callahan? Think you can tame that?" Jack didn't answer, his gaze locked on Amos, cold as iron. $10, he repeated. The auctioneer, a wiry man named Hargrove, stammered. "It's legal. She's yours." Amos waved a hand as if brushing off dust. "Take her. Don't come crying when she burns your house down." Clara stepped off the platform, needing no help, clutching a small cloth sack. She walked beside Jack, silent, her eyes daring the crowd to speak. Agatha Boone whispered to her neighbor, "He'll regret this by sundown." The road out of Dusty Hollow curved like an unanswered question. Clara sat behind Jack on his black horse, shadow not touching him, fingers gripping the saddle's edge. The wind carried the scent of dry grass and memory. Jack said nothing, letting the horse move steadily, eyes fixed ahead, 2 miles past. In silence until Clara spoke, voice rough but sharp. "You don't know what you're doing." Jack tilted his head, not looking back. "Maybe I'm not tame," she said. "Not clean, not obedient. I'm not something you can fix." Replied, "I don't fix people. I just open doors." Jack's ranch lay along the Snake River, where the plains stretched to the foothills, fenced by posts leaning like tired soldiers. The house was small, its wooden walls creaking, windows draped with coarse linen. Jack opened the door, stepping inside first, not to lead, but to show no lock would follow. He pointed to a back room. That one's clean. Use it. Clara didn't set her sack down, sitting instead by the cold hearth, knees drawn up, eyes staring into nothing as if bracing for a storm. That night, scars on her back showed as she washed at the basin lash marks, old and new, mapping her pain. Jack saw but said nothing. He left a tin cup of coffee on the table the next morning. She didn't drink it, but she didn't leave. On the second night, howls echoed from the nearby woods. The growls and panicked hoofbeats of cattle jolted Jack awake, grabbing his rifle. Clara, stirring from her rug by the hearth, clutched her knife and followed without a word. Under the silver moonlight, they worked together, driving off the wolves. Herding the cattle to safety, a wolf lunged, teeth bared, but Clara hurled a rock, striking its head, sending it fleeing. Jack looked at her saying nothing, but his eyes shifted respect, not pity. The next morning, Clara started mending the fence, not for Jack, but to prove she needed no savior. Her hammer strikes were clumsy, nails bent, but she didn't stop. Jack watched, nodded once, and returned to repairing a saddle. They didn't speak of the wolves, but the air between them softened, as if the wind had carried away a layer of doubt. Rumors in Dusty Hollow spread like wildfire on dry grass. Agatha Boone told the blacksmith Clara was a western witch, bewitching Jack with devilish eyes. Reverend Daniels, in his Sunday sermon, hinted at lost sheep led astray by wild temptation. No one confronted Jack, but their stares were sharp when he rode in for nails. Clara found an old dress in a wooden chest pail, blue calico with tiny white flowers. She stitched it, each needle prick, like sewing herself back together. When she wore it, she stood before the mirror, not checking scars, but seeing Clara Wren not a victim but herself. Jack, slicing bread, looked up and froze, knife hovering. "Fits," he said simply, nodded, the corner of her mouth twitching, not a smile, but a sign of life. On the fifth day, Clara walked to the creek, where water glittered under the sun. She stepped into the shallows, letting the hem of her dress trail, the cold biting her toes. A doe and fawn appeared across the bank, watching but not fleeing. She stood still, feeling a lightness, as if her heart might unfold. Then a twig snapped. She spun, heart pounding. Through the trees, a figure on horseback arose. He didn't approach, just stared, eyes like a hunter's. Then he turned, vanishing into the forest. Clara ran back, barefoot over sharp stones. She told Jack, voice steady, but eyes alight with fire. He said nothing, grabbed his rifle, checked the rounds, and rode into the hills. He returned at dusk, jaw tight, saying only, "He's not far." That night, he bolted the door for the first time. Clara didn't sleep, knife in hand, eyes on the window. The next day, a small landslide blocked the road to town. Rocks and earth spilled from the hills, cutting them off. They worked together, clearing stones, but the path stayed closed. Clara felt the trap tightening, not the rocks, but Amos. She checked the fence daily, finding a half-burned cigarette. Near the stable, not Jack's brand? She didn't tell him, but kept her knife closer. Jack left a basket of dried apples by the hearth. Clara left a mug of steeped herbs on the windowsill. They didn't speak of these gestures, but they were threads. Pulling them closer. On the 10th night, smoke woke Clara. She ran outside. Seeing the hay shed ablaze, flames licking the wood like a serpent's tongue, Jack was there, shirt off, sweat-streaked, hauling water from the well. Clara grabbed a wet blanket, joining him. The wind fought them, fanning the flames higher, but they didn't stop. Clara climbed the shed's roof, tossing cellar salt into the fire while Jack tore down burning planks. When the fire died, half the shed remained, shadow safe. Clara stood, dress singed, hair matted with ash, clutching the bucket. "He did it," she rasped. Jack nodded. "I know." That night, Jack bandaged Clara's hands by firelight, poured whiskey on her burns. She didn't flinch. "I thought fire was behind me," he said. "Thought men like Amos were too." Clara met his eyes, unyielding. "If I run now, it's the last thing I do with my name." Jack tied the final bandage, then stay. On the 15th day, Amos came. He rode up at dusk, on a black horse, 2 hired guns at his side, pistols glinting. He stopped before the ranch, voice sweet as poison. "I warned you, Callahan. She's mine." Jack stood on the porch, rifle ready. "She's no one's." Clara stepped out, barefoot, dress fluttering. "I'm not a debt," she said, voice like stone. Amos smirked, eyes cruel. "You're a mistake." Jack stepped forward, shielding her. "She's why I'm still breathing." Amos drew his pistol, quick as a snake. Clara was faster, her knife flashing, pinning one gunman's shoulder, screamed, fleeing. Jack fired a warning shot, stopping the other. Amos, enraged, raised his gun, but Jack shot first. He cracked, split the sky. Amos fell, blood soaking the dirt, his pistol clattering beside his twitching hand. Sheriff Grimes arrived hours later, late as always. Townsfolk gathered, half hidden, half curious. Clara stepped to Amos's body, looking down not with triumph, but closure. He didn't come for justice, she told Grimes. He came for ownership. He knew it. Grimes studied her, then Jack, then shook his head. "I didn't see nothing, neither did anyone else." That night, the hearth fire burned slow, weary from the wind. Clara sat beside Jack on the porch, her shoulder brushing his sleeve. "Oh, whoa, you never asked what I wanted," she said. Jack looked to the plains. "Figured you staying was answer enough." She met his eyes, unguarded for the first time. "Ask me now." He didn't speak, just held her gaze. She nodded. They didn't kiss, not under the moon or before the plains. But her hand slid into his, soft as a prayer. The wind eased, carrying the scent of grass and hope. Clara left her knife on the table, sleeping in a real bed, no longer watching the door. Jack sat by the hearth, rifled nearby, but his eyes were alight, as if he'd found something he thought was gone forever. The next morning, Clara knelt in the garden, hands deep in soil, planting seeds, though the season was late. Jack stood beside her. "What are you doing?" "Planting. Won't grow now." "Not this year," she said, "but something might remember." They stood under a clear Wyoming sky, no longer steel gray. Clara wasn't the girl from the auction block, and Jack wasn't the widower living with ghosts. They were two people. No promises, no salvation, just walking together. The field before them was vast, wild, full of possibility. The door stayed unlocked, and for the first time, Clara believed something could grow from the earth, not just seeds, but herself.